What were they so afraid of? I mean, the story was true. There wasn't really any dispute of that, other than from these 50 people who come from government, who are in and out of government when Democrats are in power.
That's politics to me, Scott.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to yesterday's news channel. Today we're back on Kara Swisher's podcast, and she brings up the Hunter Biden laptop story, the intel letter, the media response, the tech suppression, and somehow tries to wave it all away as just politics. And honestly, when I first watched this exchange, I had this moment of like, they've got to see this. Anyway, let's watch Scott Jennings calmly unpack exactly what happened and how Kara Swisher tries to explain it away. Let's go.
Let's talk about the book, Revolution of Common Sense, which is about Trump's first months in office, the conflict between Trump and the mainstream media, which we talked about already. Is a recurring theme, though, in your book. In Trumpism, one of the through lines of your book, for example, you reiterate the Hunter Biden laptop story, quote, the media colluded with more than 50 so-called intelligence experts in 2020 to claim that Hunter Biden's laptop was classic Russian disinformation campaign. You and I had a fight about that last year on CNN. Let's play that. There is no proof that tech companies colluded to do this. This is nonsense, and he knows it. No, I'm sorry.
There was a major institutional effort.
No, there was
to suppress that story.
Listen, I have been one of the biggest critics of tech. This is nonsense. I think the issue is this word collude. I think you might say Trump colludes with tech people now, like they're at his dinners, et cetera, and he's applying a lot of pressure and influence to them at the same time. Explain what I think is an obsession with collusion.
Well, I think in that particular case, what Republicans were exercised about was that this Hunter Biden story was emerging. There was something there, and there was an immediate attempt by media outlets to say, this is not a huge deal. I remember NPR saying, we're not going to cover this because it's not important to the American people, which I totally disagree with. And then you had tech companies and platforms literally not putting the story on their platform. I mean, they were actively censoring it on the doorstep of an election. So the general criticism is, and then on top of that, the Democrats go out and recruit 50 people with fancy titles, intelligence backgrounds to all say, oh, this is classic Russian disinformation. So you had a number of things going on. And what did we find out later? It was real. The information on it was real. And it was valid stuff about whether the Biden family was involved in things that, I think you and I might agree would be considered corrupt. And so why was there such an effort to keep this information from broad distribution to the American people on the doorstep of an election? Republicans were mad about it then, and they're still mad about it today. What were they so afraid of? I mean, the story was true. There wasn't really any dispute of that, other than from these 50 people who come from government, who are in and out of government when Democrats are in power.
That's politics to me, Scott. You're not naive.
I mean, calling everything that Scott just laid out just politics is something that I never thought I'd hear somebody say in 2025. Scott laid out a documented series of events, NPR refusing to cover the Hunter Biden story, media outlets dismissing it instantly, platforms blocking it right before the election, and 51 former intelligence officials implying it was Russian disinformation. And Kara's response is basically, happens all the time. No, Kara, this wasn't just a handful of people making their case. This was a coordinated effort to make sure voters didn't see the true information weeks before an election. Even people who didn't care about Hunter Biden saw what was happening, thought, why are they working so hard to bury this? I can't tell you how many angles she takes in this interview that just completely baffle me. Her question about why do Republicans have a fixation on the word collusion, that is bizarre. That word was definitely mainstreamed, but it wasn't conservatives. The entire country lived through years of headlines about Trump and Russia. So pretending conservatives suddenly invented this term is, come on. But what you're going to see next is even more striking because Scott isn't done. And what he brings up makes the just politics framing, if you can believe it, more impossible to defend than you probably already thought it was. Back to it.
They were making their case, just like you would say Trump just did with whatever issue he has.
Well, I don't agree that it's just a simple matter of making your case when you use your government title and you use your intelligence bona fides and you use all your credentials to flat out lie to the American people. They didn't know that. That was a political argument, but they were saying this is Russian disinformation. What you're reading is directly out of the Kremlin. It was one of the biggest lies that was told to try to get Joe Biden over the finish line. Do you think that's just politics as usual?
Yes, I do, actually. I think I do.
Do you like it?
Absolutely. I don't like it. I don't like it.
I
don't like Trump meddling with Intel. I don't like Trump meddling with the tech companies. I don't like the paper play that looks like it's available right now for these companies. I know why they're doing it. I know why they're paying this money. I know why they're giving them money. This is not a new and fresh thing. And I think the tech companies will go wherever their bread is buttered. That's really pretty much how I look at them.
Can I make one more comment about, because I think it's an important debate. You had that issue going on, and then there was, there's also been questions about what was kept from the American people, or what information was, downplayed from the American people during COVID. I mean, there were people that had opinions or ideas about COVID and what was going on during that time, and people lost access to social media. People, had their opinions, villainized. Turns out some of those people were right, and the people who were censoring them were wrong. And so I guess my point is this. There is a general feeling that if the elites make a decision about what the narrative is going to be, they can crush you, and they can either coerce tech companies into crushing you, they can coerce media into crushing you, but the crushing of opinions and dissent in this case, I think it left a bad taste in people's mouth.
I guess I could just say Brandon Carr right now making threats against Disney. I could say lawyers. I guess I could say, it's quite similar. I mean, tastes the same, tastes like chicken to me, as the expression goes.
What information about Donald Trump is being censored from the American people?
I think these are private companies. They can do whatever they want, Scott. And I don't think it was coerced or colluded. I think these, just as now, as law firms are backing down and making payments, or in universities are worried about their funding and they'll make payments. It's awfully similar in terms of what people can and can't say. I think these lawsuits against media companies, it's the same thing. It's the same exact playbook if you want to compare them. And in fact, it's a playbook that's been what's the word when you take steroids? It's on steroids is what's happening now.
In that exchange, did you hear her reference anything that is on the level with the amount of suppression of free speech that happened during the pandemic and the Hunter Biden laptop scandal? I heard nothing. And you saw there, Scott politely stopped the conversation because he really wanted to drive the point home. Because he knows what we all know and wants to make sure she understands our point of view. He knows the Hunter Biden example isn't isolated. He brings up the pandemic censorship as a second case study, not to derail the conversation, but to strengthen the point. When elites decide what the narrative is, dissent gets crushed. And notice, Kara wasn't even heading in that direction. Scott brings it up because it's the same pattern. People losing access to platforms, experts being labeled as dangerous, opinions being villainized. And years later, a lot of those censored viewpoints turned out to be correct. And she's right. Private companies can do whatever they want. But this wasn't private companies doing whatever they want. It was a coordinated narrative in an environment where powerful institutions all lean the same way. And back to her response, she throws out Brendan Carr, law firms, universities. These are debatable situations, but they're totally unrelated. None of them even come close to comparing to the federal government, big tech, and former Intel officials shaping what the public is allowed to hear. Those comparisons aren't even in the same universe. They're just complete deflections. This wasn't politics as usual, and you all know this. This was narrative control, and millions of people felt it in real time. But at least both of their tones stayed consistent throughout the entire interview. Scott stayed calm, Kara stayed dismissive. And that contrast is the whole story. One side is explaining what happened with actual specifics. The other side is shrugging and saying, everybody does it. This conversation shows why the trust of the American people collapsed. People watched powerful institutions suppress information and then got told afterward to pretend it was normal. This wasn't normal. I remember it very well, and I'm pretty sure you do too. But what do you guys think? Which moment stood out to you? Kara downplaying the Intel letter, her just politics framing, or Scott bringing up COVID as another example of opinions getting crushed? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you enjoy these breakdowns and want even more behind the scenes content, consider joining our membership program. You'll get exclusive posts and more direct access to the channel. As always, thank you for taking some time out of your day to watch this video. It does mean a lot. Otherwise, as always, I just want to say two things before I sign off here. Jesus loves you, and always put God first. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And like I said, click one of the videos that's on the screen. They're really good.